Conventions as a deductible business travel expense, according to the IRS. Business and travel conventions are exceedingly important to advancing one's career and developing a commercial business, such that attending these events can be incredibly significant from a professional standpoint. Nevertheless, it is always important to appropriately consider the deductibility of the associated costs attendant with this particular business travel, given the financial benefit accruing to the taxpayer that is picking up the costs associated with attendance at that particular convention. As the Internal Revenue Service puts it, the taxpayer can deduct the travel expenses that they expend for the attendee to partake in a convention if the taxpayer can show that the attendee's attendance benefits their trade or business. Nevertheless, there are a critical number of points of consideration, starting with the fact that the taxpayer cannot deduct the travel expenses for their family. Next, a taxpayer cannot deduct expenses associated with a convention that focuses on investment, political, social, or other purposes unrelated to the attendee's trade or business. Another restriction is that attendance at a convention where the attendee is being appointed or elected as a delegate does not in itself determine whether the attendee can deduct travel expenses. Remember, the only prospect for having one's travel expenses be deductible is if their attendance is connected to their actual trade or business. The convention agenda is an important tool for asserting deductibility for tax purposes. The convention agenda or program tends to outline the purpose of the convention. As such, the taxpayer can show that attendance at the convention benefits their trade or business by comparing their agenda with the official duties and responsibilities of their position. As the IRS notes, the convention's agenda does not have to deal specifically with their official duties and responsibilities. It will be enough if the agenda is so related to their position that it shows their attendance was for business purposes. It should also be noted that the IRS has set out specific rules for conventions held outside of what is considered to be the North American area. In those circumstances, the taxpayer cannot deduct expenses for attending such a convention, seminar, or similar meeting held outside the North American area unless 1. The convention is directly related to the active conduct of the attendee's trade or business, and 2. It is as reasonable to hold the convention outside the North American area as within the North American area. What constitutes the North American area is set out in IRS Publication 463 and Revenue Ruling 2016-16, with links to each of these documents contained in the description to this video. The reasonableness test, as adjudicated by the IRS, emphasizes the following factors to determine if it was as reasonable to attend the convention outside the North American area as within the North American area. The purpose of the convention and the activities taking place at the convention, the purposes and activities of the sponsoring organizations or groups, the homes of the active members of the sponsoring organizations, and the places at which other conventions of the sponsoring organizations or groups have been or will be held, other relevant factors that the taxpayer may present. If the convention meets these requirements, the taxpayer must also satisfy the rules for deducting expenses for business trips in general, with additional emphasis and scrutiny being undertaken for travel outside the United States, as is heavily expounded upon by the IRS. Thank you.